as the context has been set here, we are going to talk about accounts payable process automation, which is SAP vendor invoice management solution. This is an ABAP add-on on top of your ERP system, which could be SAP ECC or SAP S4 HANA, right? And whatever automation capabilities are brought in by this solution, that is going to directly complement your existing invoice processing transactions in your ERP system like Miro or FB60, right? So before I get into the solution view, these are some of the best practices basis which this entire solution has been designed, right? So as a vendor, obviously they can send you the invoices through various input channel, which could be a paper channel, which could be a email channel, or which could be a supplier portal channel as well. So answer is yes, SAP vendor invoice management as a solution is able to capture the invoices as well as supporting documents through any of these channels. If it's a paper channel, there is a enterprise scanning software as well. You can do a bulk scanning, bulk archival, you can do barcode recognitions, right? Similarly, you can also integrate with a central email ID wherein vendors can send you invoices to a central email ID, and from there it will go to SAP inbox and vendor invoice management solution will take over. Similarly, it can also come through a digital channel like supplier portal. So yes, you can capture the invoices through multiple input channels, which are coming either in hard copies, email, or through a supplier portal channel. Once this is done, the unique document number is generated. We call it as vendor invoice management document number. And this document number will act as a foundation for tracking the invoice lifecycle from capture till posting up to the payment stages, right? Post the document registration has been done, it has been archived, it has been also linked with the relevant transactions in SAP ERP system. The next phase is the India localized OCR. Okay, so this is where we brought in the India localization, so wherein you can read all the mandatory information from the incoming invoices, which could be at a header level or at a line item level, and then it can also read the QR code based data as well, right? Which includes GST specific detail, right? So this could be 64-digit IRN number. This could be the GST and ID of buyer or supplier or HSN code. So there are 8 parameters which are included in the QR code. So all these details can be captured by the India localized OCR and auto populate the data into the ERP system, eliminating great amount of manual data entry. So whether it is your PO number, invoice number, delivery date, line item level details, or GST specific detail via a QR code. So every supplier which is more than 50 crore in turnover, he has to give a QR code based invoice or including the e-invoicing number. And that is where we will auto populate this data using a India localized OCR into your ERP system, right? So capture, then registration of the document using a unique document number, followed by the OCR, which is India localized OCR. And then the next stage is around business rule and business validations. Okay. So again, in this case, depending on the nature of invoice, you have more than 150 plus business rules, which are available out of box with SAP vendor invoice management solution, right? So whether it's a material invoice or a service invoice or a non-PO invoice or a transport invoice, depending on the nature of invoice, you can configure these out-of-box business rules, which are available with SAP vendor invoice management solution. And if there are no exceptions, you still have an option to review the invoice, or you can also have an auto posting scenario as well. However, if there are any exceptions, then it will route the problem invoice to right person depending on the nature of exception. And then the entire exception handling, it can happen within your ERP system itself with a predefined workflow process. So every business rule which has been configured also has an out of box workflow, which is also available with the solution. You need to only configure the workflow matrix, which changes from customer to customer, right? But you don't need to write these business rules, all the out of box workflows which are there that can be leveraged as part of the solution framework. And the entire exception handling and the problem resolution also happen within your ERP system itself. right? As a next step, obviously you can further streamline your invoice management process or your accounts payable process with predefined analytics and the dashboards, right? So there are more than 80 criteria through which you can monitor the entire invoice processing. There are various reports like liability report, exception analysis report, aging report, productivity report, which you can leverage to further streamline your vendor invoice management processes. You can also extend this analytics to your suppliers as well, who can also get a visibility on the invoice and payment life cycle, whether invoice is received, partially paid, completely paid, if it is rejected, what is the exception reason, and so on. So this visibility can be shared with your suppliers as well, right? So fundamental of implementation of this kind of solution is to reduce the invoice processing time, increase the vendor discount capture rate, improve your vendor relationship, avoid the payment delays, eliminate manual interventions, right? Do the exception handling within SAP, get rid of paper driven processes, improve the touchless ratio. So these are various scenarios that why any customer would implement this solution, right? So again, the fundamental of the solution is it is seamlessly integrated with SAP ERP. There is a pre-built integration with Miro, FB60, Migo transactions. There is a complete audit trail and the workflow history, which will be available along with supporting documents within your ERP system. And you can also apply your noting, annotations, comments on the digital copy of the document. For the users who are working outside SAP, you can also leverage mobile enabled applications, which are also part of this SAP vendor invoice management solution, right? And this can allow you to do approval, exception handling, KPI reporting, and monitoring on the fly outside SAP environment as well, right? So while these are some of the fundamentals and the best practices of how you can achieve accounts payable, it is one of the proven solution. There are many customers in India who have been leveraging this solution. And again, customers in government space, in PSU space, and also many customers across industries, they have been leveraging the solution to optimize their invoice processing, reduce the invoice processing time, right? And improve the vendor relationships, improve the user productivity. So you can see customers across various industries, whether it is energy, oil and gas, right? Or it is utilities or power, right? So there are customers across various industries who have gone ahead and deployed this solution for vendor invoice management processes, right? So we will also be sharing some of the case studies with you as a follow-up to this session, which you can go through at your convenience to look at various quantified and qualitative benefits of implementing this solution, right? So this is what the architecture which I talked about. You can receive the vendor invoices through various channels, whether it is paper channel or channel or a supplier portal channel. The vendors can send the invoices through any of these channels. It will be archived to the archive repository, and then it will be linked with the relevant transaction in your S4HANA system. It will automatically appear in the invoice capture center, which is where the entire OCR process will happen, along with extraction of mandatory fields and the QR code based data, followed by the business rules and validation depending on the nature of invoice. You can also create the queue of the invoice. So you can have a queue for material, queue for service, queue for a non-PO invoice, and then the out-of-box business rules can be applied for price match, quantity match, vendor code validation, right? Taxation information specific validation. So all these business rules are available with this SAP vendor invoice management solution, and that will come into picture. And if there are no exceptions, you can have a reviewer or you can also have a auto posting. However, if there are any exception, you can have a corresponding workflow, the entire exception handling, analytics, reporting, everything done within your ERP system itself. And for individuals working outside SAP S4HANA, you can use the mobile enabled applications, and you can also facilitate the analytics to your suppliers as well, who can also track the invoice status and the payment status. So these are three building blocks. You have vendor invoice management, which is an add-on to your ERP system. You have a invoice capture center, which is a India localized OCR. And then you have a complete content management and the archiving layer, which is responsible for content capture, content integration with your transactions in ERP system, right? And also allowing you to collaborate on the content in terms of putting your notings, annotations, comments during the workflow cycle. right? So this is the process which I have discussed. You have incoming document, you have OCR, you have invoice validation, exception routing if there are any exceptions, exception resolution, invoice approval and posting, followed by analytics and monitoring. We will quickly go into a brief of each and every step. So for example, you have received the invoice through a paper channel. It is a hard copy. So in that case, we provide an enterprise scanning software which can do bulk scanning and bulk archival of the document, and also link the documents with the relevant transactions in the ERP system. You also have barcode recognition capabilities so that you can segregate and classify the document, whether it belongs to a specific plant or a specific department based on the attributes of the document. Right? Other than enterprise scanning, you can also receive invoices and supporting documents via a email channel or via a supplier portal channel as well. Now, once the document is captured either via paper, email, or supplier portal, this will also get registered in your ERP system. And this is where the vendor invoice management analytics comes into picture. You will be able to see this transaction code within your ERP with the help of this add-on. And you can see there is a unique document number which is on the left hand side. This is generated every time you capture a document, and this becomes the foundation for tracking the invoice lifecycle. So you can also see the process status like extraction completed, which means OCR has done the job and now the invoice is at a business rule and validation phase. Similarly, sent to OCR, which means I have done the document capture and now it is sent to OCR for data extraction. Another status is posted, and you can also see the corresponding accounting document number as well. On the right hand side, you can also look at the process history and the approval history. So when the document was captured, when the OCR was done, which business rule were applied, which business rule got failed, who is the current in charge of the invoice. So the entire process history along with the comment history will also be available to you from this centralized dashboard. And this is a dynamic dashboard. It will keep on changing depending on the actual process step of every invoice. You can also bring additional data like payment data based on the clearing document within this dashboard, because ultimately this is sitting on top of your ERP system and the entire data is there in your ERP system, on top of which this vendor invoice management analytics will work. Right? Now, once the document capture part is done, it has been also registered. The next phase is that document will automatically appear in the invoice capture center, from where I can capture the header level information as well as line item level information. We have also localized the solution from India perspective to read the QR code from the incoming supplier invoice and auto populate the 64-digit IRN number and other 7 parameters which are part of the QR code automatically into your ERP system, eliminating great amount of manual data entry. Right? So this solution has been used by customers globally, not only in India, and that is where the localization aspects comes into picture. And we did it from a GST perspective, which is under the purview of accounts payable. Right? Even after having a India localized OCR, let's say the quality of invoice is not good or the scanning resolution is not good, there is a possibility that 1 or 2 fields are not picked by OCR. So in such case, the exception workflow will be triggered. Person responsible for workflow exception will be able to access it from his ERP system itself. He can see that in this case, the invoice number is not picked by OCR. There is a single click entry option which he will get from the ERP screens itself. He can enable this single click entry, put his cursor on the invoice number on the left hand side and then on the document image, and this data will be auto populated on the left hand side in the input SAP screen. You can also see the PO workspace, vendor workspace for the PO data, PR data, GR data, or supporting vendor documents without leaving the screen. That is how you can have a complete 360-degree view of the exception as well as the supporting documents and the workflow along with the comment history. And in this case, I have resolved the exception, which was because of OCR not picking one of the mandatory field using single click entry option, which is based on a machine learning technology. So in the backend, there is a machine learning which is also happening, which is learning from the process. So the next time when the similar invoice come, this one field which was not picked by OCR, that will also get auto extracted. So that is where you can further improve the accuracy of OCR software as well. However, with GST QR code coming into picture, we obviously expect a very good accuracy, and you can capture most of the details from the QR code as well, apart from the header level and the line item level information. Now, once the capture part is done, OCR part is done, the next phase is business rule, depending on the nature of invoice. As I said, this solution provides more than 150 plus business rule out of box for both PO and non-PO scenarios. So this is for non-PO. Similarly, this is for PO-based invoices, which could be invalid PO number, invalid vendor code, or missing item quantity, invalid tax information, or service entry required, or GR not done. So all these business rules are available out of box. They are written in ABAP, which is your ERP programming languages, and every business rule has a corresponding workflow as well. So if there are no exceptions, you can do a auto posting. However, if there are exceptions, it can trigger a workflow notification, right? And again, the workflow notification can go into the mailbox as well. You can again log in into your ERP system. You can have a 360-degree view of the entire vendor invoice management analytics framework. You can see the process status like posted, blog, awaiting approval, or indexed. You can see the exception reason. You can see the corresponding in charge of the exception or the workflow, who is the corresponding vendor. And you can also have a company code or the unique document number, which is generated at the time of document capture. And on the right hand side, you can also look at the process history and the approval history. So this is how you will be able to see the VIM analytics within your ERP system for invoice lifecycle tracking. And then you can go to the vendor invoice management workplace, which we call as VIM workplace, to execute the exception scenarios. You have my inbox, and again, you can execute the workflow item, and you can land up into this screen within your ERP system. You can have a complete view of document, the related data record from the PO workspace and the vendor workspace, the comment history, the workflow history. And on the left-hand side, you have certain predefined process option to resolve the exception. So in this case, PO data is available, invoice data is available, but GR is missing. So the workflow was routed to somebody in the store department, and he will have an option of post GR from the workflow itself. I can also apply business rule to check that which business rule has got failed, which has successfully cleared, why this invoice has come to me. Similarly, I can refer the invoice to somebody else to get an additional piece of information using an ad hoc workflow functionality. So you also have a refer option as one of the process options. So this is what is added by the vendor invoice management solution for exception handling scenarios. And then let's say you can click on apply business rule. You can see that for this invoice, there are 10 business rules which has been applied. Everything is in green in this case, which means there is no exception, and it has just come for your review. But for another invoice, there are 5 exceptions which are highlighted in red here: invalid PO number, missing invoice date, vendor code mismatch, or suspected duplicate. And you can also see the corresponding in charge of all these exceptions as well. If there are multiple exceptions, you can also have parallel workflow as well. So this gives you a 360-degree visibility of all the business rule which has been applied within the your invoice processing use case, and you can have a corresponding visibility of who is the in charge of the invoice, who is resolving the exceptions, right? Similarly, if let's say the quality check has failed, another example, then as an account payable person, I will get a workflow and I can see one of the process option, return to vendor. Once I click on return to vendor, this will pick up the email address of the vendor from the vendor master record. I can give the return reason, I can put my comments, and then with one single click, it will trigger a system generated email to the vendor with an invoice copy attached to it, and the return reasons and the comments also mentioned on top of it. So you can also do a vendor collaboration without leaving your SAP ERP screen by using this return to vendor option, which is one of the process option. In this case, I have leveraged this because there was a quality issue, right? You can also have a visibility of the vendor and the purchase order centric workspace within your ERP system for 360-degree view of data and document organized in a folder structure. You can have a PO data, PR data, GR data, right? You can see all the supporting documents. You can also open up the document using a document viewer, which is also part of this vendor invoice management solution. You can also click on the pen tab to put your noting, annotations, and comments on the digital copy of the document, right? So in this case, I have imaging viewers. There is a Windows viewer and there is a web viewer as well. If you operate in a mobile or a tablet, you can use the web viewer. And if you operate in ERP system, you can use a Windows viewer. Without downloading the document, you can display all the documents and then click on the pen tab and you can start putting your noting annotations as well. So this could be a tick mark, this could be a redlining, this could be a comment. And if you want to put a comment under note editor, that is also possible, which is tagged with the workflow along with the date and timestamp. So this is how you can further do a collaboration on the exception scenario and completely get rid of paper-driven activities happening outside of your ERP system. Duplicate check is also one of the earliest check which happens in the entire cycle. There is a possibility that same invoice has come twice. Today it has come through a paper channel. Tomorrow it has come through an email channel. So based on the metadata of the invoice, it will give you a suspected duplicate alert. And then if it's a duplicate, no further business rule will be applied. If it's not a duplicate, as per the confirmation by the end user who is processing the workflow, then it will apply other business rule. So you can catch the duplicate invoices at a very early stage of capture and OCR rather than leaving it to the Miro or FB60 stage. Right. Again, you can also leverage the entire solution capability over mobile and tablet as well. So you saw the vendor invoice management workplace within ERP. The same workplace is available over tablet environment as well. You can look at all the invoices pending for action. You can look at the approval history along with date and timestamp. You can look at attachments and images and then put your noting annotations and approve it. Similarly, all these apps are also available over mobile environment as well, like Resolve Invoice Exception, Approve Invoices, My Processed Invoices, KPI Dashboard. You can again look at your invoices. You can look at the master and transaction detail. You can look at the history. You can look at the attachments and then approve and confirm. Right. Similarly, we have also given an option of smart coding for non-PO invoice, which is based on a machine learning technology. So typically what happens in a non-PO scenario, there is no reference in the backend and it requires invoices to be routed to the respective department who has to manually enter the GL data and the cost center data, right? So this is what we can automate. So based on the historical invoices for a given department and based on the attributes of the current invoices, the system can propose you the GL account and the cost center data with a similarity score. You can apply this recommendation and in case you don't agree, you can also cancel it and then manually enter the GL data and the cost center data. So objective here is to automate the data entry process for non-PO scenario as well. And this functionality, again, you can leverage within your ERP system or the mobile enabled application. You can also do the translation of the user comment. If you have any translation services, you can integrate that with vendor invoice management solution and all the comment which has been made by the processors and the approver can be translated into the local language, right? And again, this can be achieved within SAP ERP or the mobile enabled environment as well. Right, you can also configure the processes like if there are any specific SLAs, if there is a quantity mismatch, it has to be resolved within 24 hours. And if somebody is not acting on it, it can notify the substitute and the manager of that particular person so that you are adhering to the SLAs of invoice processing. There are various reports available. You can group the invoices by document status, by company code, by exception reason, by vendor code, right? You can also look at the invoices by type, total liability by invoice status, invoices processed with and without exceptions, invoices which are coming via paper channel or via email channel or via portal channel. What are my top exceptions? What are my top vendors? You can also look at productivity report. There are 20 people in the accounts payable team who is taking how much time in processing a particular exception scenario, right? So how you can further improve the productivity. You can also define the buckets of invoice processing in terms of aging report. and you can also see who is the current in charge of the invoice and further take necessary action on top of it. You can also look at liability report within your ERP system itself. And again, you can group the invoices by PO, non-PO, and link it with the GL data and the cost center data, and look at your accruals and liabilities depending on the process step of every invoice. You can also look at certain key KPIs like what is my e-invoicing ratio. So after implementation of this solution, how many invoices are coming via paper channel, how many are coming via digital channel like email or a portal, what is my touchless ratio. So after implementation of this solution, how many invoices goes in a workflow driven exception process and how many are straight posted. Similarly, you can analyze your top exceptions as well and link it with the vendor or company code and notify your vendor to send you the correct invoices. So there is an out of box exception analysis report also, which you can get as part of vendor invoice management analytics. You can also have a drill down reports as well, along with various KPIs and dimensions. You can also give a visibility of reports to your supplier as well. They can also track the invoice status and the payment status. These are various differentiators which we have discussed in this session briefly. So a seamless integration with SAP, whether it is Miro, FB60, no connector required, no customization required. Out-of-box integration is available with all SAP transaction. The solution gives you more than 150 plus business rules out of box for both PO, non-PO, and transport-based invoices, which you can leverage. And every business rule has a corresponding workflow as well. Since it operates on a ABAP-based language, if you already have some of the business rule configured in your system today, that can be also taken care by the vendor invoice management solution. Plus, you can leverage additional business rules which are available with the solution. It's a localized product. I gave example of GST e-invoicing scenario. So the India localized OCR is available to extract the information from the incoming supplier invoice and auto-populate the data in your ERP system. Similarly, pre-built analytics, I talked about more than 80 criteria, a lot of out-of-box reports, which can further streamline your invoice processing. The entire digital experience with mobile and tablet-enabled applications, the supplier self-service for collaboration, and the return to vendor option, which I talked about. Content capture across multiple channels, whether it is paper, whether it is email, whether it is portal or desktop. The content can be captured from multiple channels. It can be archived in a separate archive repository, and which will be linked with the relevant transaction in SAP. And as an end user, you can retrieve the content from your ERP system or from mobile enabled application in a folder structure, which I talked about. You can do a collaboration in terms of noting, annotations, and comments during a workflow cycle. You can also have a problem invoice resolution dashboard. I talked about predefined process options, apply business rule to get a visibility of all the business rules which are applied on the invoice, and then the entire exception handling mechanism. There is no duplicate IT environment. The advantage is that SAP vendor invoice management solution will operate as an add-on to your S4HANA or your ECC system, which means there is no duplicate environment for invoice processing, and there is a future proof that it will work with future S4HANA upgrades as well, right? Beyond accounts payable, you can leverage the content management and the OCR solution to other business functions as well. So it is not only restricted to accounts payable. You can leverage this solution for GR automation, for sales order processing automation, for remittance advice matching with the account receivable, or for HR scenarios. So the entire content management and the OCR layer can be leveraged beyond accounts payable to other business functions as well. And the invoice management solution is specific to accounts payable. So overall, these three components put together are part of my architecture. OCR, the content management layer, it can scale beyond accounts payable to other departments and business function. And the vendor invoice management is very specific for AP automation. So with this, I take a pause. If there are any questions, happy to answer it. And obviously, if you want to see the system demo, we can do more deep dive sessions on a one-on-one basis. Yeah. So thanks for your time. Happy to answer any questions. Yeah.